Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, David here, and welcome back to another video. This one is, yes, about Metaphor ReFantazio again, because I beat the game, I went back to it, replayed some of that good old content that I missed out during my first playthrough, make sure that I completed everything, which puts me at around 100 hours of playtime for Metaphor at this point, and man, is this game still so good. It deserves all the praise that it got. In today's video, I am going to be focusing on one aspect of the game that I like so much, and that is none other than our protagonist, the main character of Metaphor ReFantazio. This video is sponsored by ATLUS West. Thank you so much, ATLUS, for sponsoring today's video, and thank you guys so much for tuning in. Before I get into the swing of things, I do want to say there might be minor story spoilers for Metaphor in terms of what I'm showing on screen and also what's going to be discussed. I'm really putting the emphasis on minor. I don't think you're going to have any type of problem with what I'm going to discuss in today's video, but if you want to stay 1000% safe, maybe put this video in your watch later list and come back later to give it a shot. Let's get right into it. The protagonist of Metaphor ReFantazio is a young innocent boy from the Elder tribe, the only tribe that the Sanctus Church of Ukrainia condemned due to their abilities to control magic from birth. Being born in such an unjust world, he's immediately drowned out to be an innocent and clueless young boy. He really stands out by not knowing much about the royal capital of Ukrainia and its prominent figures like Louis Gurubern. With really no one to relate to other than his fairy companion Gallica, the protagonist is led and guided by his fantasy novel that was given to him by the prince, his childhood friend. His fantasy novel describes a world without magic or notions of tribes. Our protagonist made this book his reason to go out on a journey. Quite a monumental goal, if you ask me. By following this novel, our protagonist grows from nothing to a complex figure with the ability to make a difference in the blink of an eye. This video is my in-depth analysis of how Metaphor ReFantazio's protagonist changed the significance of what a JRPG protagonist needs to be in my eyes. If you have not played Metaphor ReFantazio yet, what are you waiting for? There is a free demo available for download on all platforms that the game is on, which would be PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox platform, and it's available on PC via Steam or the Windows Store. Please check out Metaphor ReFantazio. The link is in the description. Download the demo, purchase the game now. In JRPGs in general, I think there are too many silent protagonists or main characters that lack in depth. What I'm looking for in a protagonist for games is a character that I can relate to and a character that shows signs of growth through their journey and adventure. In most games, growth is shown through gaining experience or increasing some sort of stats. The protagonist showed immense growth through his journey. From a clueless young elder boy to a pillar in the race for the throne to become the next king of Ukrainia. He is by himself, and what he represents, the definition of what a good protagonist should be, in my opinion. In a gameplay sense, our protagonist's growth is being shown through royal virtues. These royal virtues are social stats. He starts at level 1 royal virtues in all categories to max in all categories by the end of the experience, depending on how you play the game, of course. By the end of the game, looking at your maxed royal virtues doesn't just feel like you worked your way to this point. It actually means something. I didn't grind my way through levels. I can explain how my protagonist grew in every single one of those virtues by telling you his story and how it developed him. So we have 5 royal virtues in Metaphor. The first one is courage. Right at the start of the game, you can see that our protagonist is far from the courageous type. He is immediately drawn to the royal guards in Grantrod and he's trying to enter the guards. But he's intimidated by the leader of the guards, who's just a big bully at the end of the day. And at the end of your game, his courage increased so much and developed so much that he's now able to face some of the leaders like Louis of Ukrainia and face them face to face and see like, hey, I know you're imposing, but I'll be there. And I'll confront you because my ideals and what's described in my fantasy book is different from what you're sharing as far as your ideals goes. It shows immense growth, and again, I am here for it, and that's what makes our protagonist so special. The next royal virtues is none other than wisdom. At the beginning of his journey, the protagonist is constantly judged for just being an elder. But through sheerless determination, he not only proved to himself that there's more to a person than tribe's affiliation, but he's also proved that to the entire kingdom of Ukrainia. Our protagonist is making a difference for the world. The wisdom level for a young boy like this is crazy, and there's so much depth to the character that, man, am I here for it when it comes to, again, his royal virtues specifically. I'm not done. Let's move on to tolerance, which is our next virtues. I think those royal virtues, by the way, are very unique and original. It makes me look at my main character in a different way. Love it. He went from being totally shocked at the simple sight of a homeless Priapus to having the capacity to want to make a change and not get too emotionally involved at every pebble in his path. When you are a leader, when you want to be a leader, when you have massive aspirations, we're talking aspirations to change how the world sees things, you need to have tolerance, and you need to be tolerant to, again, as I described, pebbles that you'll find in your road. At some point, it's going to be massive boulders that are going to be blocking your path. You'll make your way over that boulder. The next royal virtue is none other than eloquence. So our protagonist's eloquence increased pretty much from a 0 to 100 forcefully simply through the race for the throne. So in metaphor, you have to enter the royal tournament to be able to sit on the throne and be the next king of the kingdom. Talking in front of an audience, negotiating with an enemy, debating with a fellow runner for the throne in front of a crowd, speaking in front of the crowd. Those are all ways that our protagonist evolved his dialogue and speech through his journey. And our final royal virtue speaks for itself, it's imagination. It's through severe perseverance to make the world into a fantasy world like in his novel that he was able to develop his imagination, hearing the tales of a royal guard by spending time with Hulkenberg, a party member, or simply by assisting Heismay in finding the right place to bury his son. He really understood what it means to be sensible to others and to be able to think for yourself, develop yourself as an individual. The royal virtues are only a little thing in metaphor ReFantazio, but I'm able to describe what makes the protagonist so good simply by looking at the royal virtues that are presented as a gameplay feature. It really shows how much of a masterpiece this game is and how expertly crafted it was developed. With ATLUS, we generally get some very interesting protagonists. It's nothing new here, but they don't always shine as much as it metaphors protagonists in my opinion. We're used to silent protagonists in ATLUS titles. Persona 5, Shin Megami Tensei 5, two recent examples of great protagonists that are pretty much silent for 99% of their game. Persona is all about giving the choice to the player so they can identify themselves as the protagonist. It works well with Persona games having a silent protagonist and a ton of dialogue options for decision making with relationships and more. In Metaphor ReFantazio, the MC is on a journey. He has a goal in mind, but is lost at the start. It's by growing through meeting friends and of course through the chapters of his fantasy novel that he's able to grow into his own being with a developed and in-depth personality of his own. A silent protagonist wouldn't have made sense here in my opinion. To be able to have a voice to relate to in Metaphor is extremely refreshing, plus it made for some funny and relatable moments.
I am absolutely not old-fashioned or stubborn.
He didn't even finish.
In my experience with Metaphor, having a voiced MC made me more attached and more involved to the protagonist and his story. I couldn't help but smile through every single bit of dialogue. Calibien, the English voice actor for the protagonist, did a fantastic job voicing the protagonist. He was able to convey emotions through his voice, and it really made a difference with how much I could relate to the MC. If all JRPGs were able to accomplish what Studio Zero did with Metaphor's protagonist, we would certainly have a hard time ranking protags. But since that's not the case, it's easy for me to say that Metaphor's protagonist has to be one of the best MCs ever, in my opinion. I can't help but think about how ATLUS created a whole new and second MC with the portable version of Persona 3, and it worked so well. I cannot imagine a world where they change the protagonist of Metaphor and it makes as much sense as it does here. And I think that is saying a lot. So let me say it one last time. Do yourselves a favor, if you have not played Metaphor ReFantazio, the demo is free to download on all platforms that the game is available on, which would be Xbox platforms, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and PC as well. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to ATLUS for sponsoring today's video.